fighter has the highest fight IQ?
I don't think there's nobody in the game that has the fight IQ that I have.
Off the charts.
His IQ
the
is
highest
insane.
fight IQ maybe ever.
This guy hits hard. He's tough. He's this, he's that. And this guy has a dream. But my fight IQ will win this fight.
Welcome to the Fight IQ podcast. We're back with another episode. This weekend we have UFC Fight Night 254 in London. Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. Now, there are some kind of other fun fights on this card. I'm looking forward to Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg. We got Kevin Holland fighting on this card. I don't think he really cares, so I don't. Jordan Vucenic, former Cage Warriors champion, that could be pretty exciting. Mm-hmm. But let's start at the bottom of the prelims here. Guram Kutateladze versus Kawi Fernandez. I think this is Guram's easiest fight in the UFC so far. He's got, I think, 3 fights in the UFC, and they've all been tough. Damir Ismagulov comes to mind. I remember that fight. But I am going to go with Guram here. Like I said, I just think he's seen like some pretty high-level competition in the UFC. Kawi Fernandez is an explosive guy. He's got power. I just think Guram can handle that level of opponent.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with either of these guys, but I did look into them a little bit here, and I was noticing the significant difference in opponents that they've had leading up to this fight. Guram is actually listed, I think, as the biggest favorite of the card at a minus 425, so I think that's a pretty safe pick.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's move up. Nathan Fletcher versus Callan Loughran, however you say his name. Mm-hmm. Callan Loughran, he's like legitimately, when you see these fighters who it looks like their neck is so big, it's like impossible for them to actually move their head separately of their body.
Yeah.
That's this dude. He's like bantamweight Drew Dober with no footwork and zero head movement. I think Nathan Fletcher, although he didn't win on The Ultimate Fighter, I think he's more talented than a Callan Loughran. I think he's more evasive and maneuvers decently well on the feet, and then he's got the grappling advantage too. Yeah. I'm never gonna pick Callan Loughran to win a fight. He's got a decent record, but I just don't like his style. He's just very plotty forward with no good footwork, no real plan of entry. He just kind of is like, I'm going to move forward and see if I can hit this guy. I'm just never going to pick that style to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at this one. Nathan Fletcher, obviously has a pretty substantial grappling advantage in this one. He has 7 wins by sub already, one of which was his first fight in the UFC. Colin Loughran's 1 and 2 in the UFC, all going to decision. So he's kind of one of those guys that's just an average fighter. He doesn't really have anything that's particularly noteworthy, nothing that's going to give him like a notable, substantial advantage here. I think Nathan gets this one done by submission.
Nice pick.
Yeah.
Next one, Shauna Bannon versus Pooja. Congrats, UFC. You've done it.
We got another one.
You have officially made the worst fight in UFC history. This is it right here. Yeah. I don't think it gets any worse than this. We've seen, some fights on a card where we're just like, holy shit, bathroom break, food break, whatever. This is just like, I might even exit out of the tab while this fight's going on. Shauna Bannon versus Pooja. Who cares? Who cares? I'm not even going to justify it by breaking it down. But this is the worst fight the UFC has ever put together. Congrats. Up next, Christian Leroy Duncan versus Andre Pulyaev.
Yeah.
I'm going CLD. I like his style.
I do as well. I was looking at this one. CLD's had a really good record so far. He's had a handful of finishes in the UFC. His only 2 losses so far are to Armin Petrosyan and RoboCop, which are both pretty substantial.
Yeah, those aren't bad.
Those are not bad people to lose to. Obviously, Pulayev making his debut. I think he was Contender Series. It was a decision victory. Always a little tough to see getting a decision on the Contender Series and still getting a contract out of it. I guess if it was a total war, that's one thing, but
dude, I've watched every single episode, every single season of Contender Series. I have zero clue who this guy is.
All right.
Very unmemorable.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Christian Leroy Duncan. You know, in the fight against RoboCop, I kind of think like Christian Leroy Duncan was riding sort of like this confidence where he felt like he was maybe a step up from RoboCop at the time, and you don't want to underestimate RoboCop. That did not work out for Christian Leroy Duncan. And then in the Armin Petrosian fight, it was kind of a same deal. I feel like he underestimated Petrosian a little bit and just was trying to throw a bunch of flashy shit. Where like if he really kind of buckled down, like he is better than Petrosian.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how I feel about this one. Also, kind of cool. We got Christian Leroy Duncan and Chris Duncan later on this card. Kind of funny. Kind of funny.
I like it.
Card. Anyway, let's move up. Marcin Tybura versus Mick Parkin.
Yeah, this is a good fight. It's a heavyweight bout here. You know, Mick Parkin is one of those guys. He's 10-0. He's been putting on a tear as far as, you know, from what you can see. That being said, Marcin Tybura is one of those guys that's never to be underestimated. We've seen it happen. He's one of those guys that if you're not ready, you're not going to beat him. If you're really not ready to be in that top 10 of the division, he's not the guy that you're ready to see. His last fight out, that grappling exchange from his last fight out, I think was one of those things where people forgot that Marcin Tybura really has some high-level skill. He's just fought another high-level opponent a lot of times, so it ends up being that way.
It's crazy to me that people were picking Renato Janice to win that fight. Just absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah.
And this is a huge step up for Mick Parkin. He's like right now biggest can crusher in the heavyweight division, and you know, whatever. I'm sure they're just fighting whoever he's just fighting whoever the UFC is asking him to fight. Yep. But I mean, dude, looking back, I'm on his tap out, bro. His last fight was Lukasz Brzeski. I mean, look, he knocked him out in round 1, but Marcin Tybura is no Lukasz Brzeski, bro.
No.
Going from Lukasz Brzeski to Marcin Tybura is a huge step up.
Yes.
And I just think like the heavyweight division is dealing with a severe lack of competition, a severe lack of talented fighters in the division. But dude, Marcin Tybura is way better than Brzeski's, way better than Mosman. Mosman sucks, and he couldn't. Mick Parkin couldn't even finish Mosman, and I do think Mick Parkin is pretty good. Like I think he's on the same level as like a Renato Janice. I think he could, you know, have a moment or two where he gives a little bit of trouble to Tybura on the feet, but at the end of the day, like, Marcin Tybura is only getting beat by the best of the best. I mean, every time he comes up on the card, this is, you know, we say the same thing about him. He's the fraud checker of the division. He's this, he's that. He is. He straight up is. And if you're not one of the best in the world, you're not going to beat Marcin Tybura. That's why I'm picking him to beat Mick Parkin here.
Nice. Yeah, you know, I'm in the same boat with you. I mean, Mick Parkin's great. He's got that kind of potential that, you know, we like seeing these big, heavy-handed Brits. We've got Tom Aspinall. We've got Mick Parkin. You know, these guys are, you know, gaining popularity, but it is one of those boats where I think Tybura really is just going to outclass him here.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, Mick Parkin, he's nothing special.
No.
He's not like one of these guys who you're like a Cyril Gane, where you're like, oh my God, he's so athletic for a heavyweight. He's not like, oh my God, Derek Lewis, if he touches you, you're going out. Like,
right.
He's none of that. He's going to walk at Marcin Tybura, probably throw some like Chris Dawkins style hooks where he's like, like those sort of hooks. That's what Mick Parkin does. And he beats anyone who doesn't really have much skill, but he's not going to beat Marcin Tybura.
No.
All right. Next up, a prospect that I'm really, really hyped on, Loner Kavanagh.
Yes.
You know, if you've looked into him at all, you've seen the highlights from pre-UFC.
Yep.
And then an awesome fight on the Contender Series to get him in. And I believe, like, okay, so people were not super impressed by his debut against Ochoa. But, dude, I think they're both going to be ranked in the future.
Yes, most
Ochoa,
definitely.
I think, like, it's weird because Ochoa was making his debut too, but I still think it was like one of the toughest fights he could have had in his debut. There's a lot of people in the UFC's flyweight division right now that aren't as good as Jose Ochoa.
Yes.
So I think it was a tough fight for Loner Kavanagh because Ochoa is kind of like this lanky guy, and Felipe dos Santos. Slow down for a second.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that same build as Jose Ochoa, but I don't think he's as skilled. I think this is going to be an easier fight for Kavanaugh than his debut.
Yeah, I was looking into this one a little bit. Also a big fan of Kavanaugh. His pre-UFC highlights are one of those things where it really gets you hyped to kind of see him do more. His debut was a great fight, I think, overall, and it rose stock for both of those fighters. And I think we even said as much at the time that, that was one of those fights where for two guys that didn't have much experience coming into this, they looked really good. And
Yeah,
they looked
absolutely.
they looked like they could compete in the upper levels of the flyweight division from that point. And I think they
Yeah, that's
absolutely
what I
both
thought.
will.
Yeah.
So for that, I'm going Kavanaugh with this one as well. I think he gets it done here.
Yeah, he's slick on the feet. He's got great anti-grappling. If
Yeah.
anything, Dos Santos, I think he's coming out of that the shoot to box camp with Charles Oliveira. If anything, I think his grappling would be the advantage, but Loner Kavanaugh has really good counter grappling.
Yeah.
He's really good at keeping it on the feet, and although he's a smaller flyweight, he's kind of like he reminds me of Joshua Van, but with better kicks.
Yeah.
If Loner keeps winning, I would eventually love to see a Loner Kavanaugh versus Joshua Van matchup.
That'd be great.
I think they have a very similar. Joshua Van is a little bit more plotty, but when you talk about smaller guys who really need to work to close that distance, the reason why Loner Kavanaugh likes to keep it at a little bit more of a distance is because he utilizes his kicks a little bit more than Joshua Van does.
Yeah.
Van is like kind of just strictly boxing and walks you down. But Kavanaugh has those kicks in his game, so he kind of can play the distance game a little better than Joshua Van can. But if it comes down to it, he can pressure you and box you up too. Really good shots to the body, switches it up, body head. I like the work that Loner Kavanaugh does. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's move up. Last fight of the prelims, Jai Herbert versus Chris Padilla.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Jai Herbert's one of those guys that's kind of had an up and down career. Fought Ilya. We talked about this recently. Fought Ilya when Ilya moved up to lightweight for a short kind of notice fight.
Yeah, very short.
But he's never really had that kind of moment of greatness. He's one of those guys that's had moments where he's looked good, but I can't say that I've ever been like, man, this is the Jai Herbert that people need to worry about.
Yeah, he's just had a really mixed UFC career.
Yeah.
As crazy as it is, he's got some good decision wins. He's been in some wars too.
Yeah.
He had a good performance in the draw against Ludovic Klein. Whatever. I know no one gets excited about a draw, but that was a good back and forth fight. And Ludovic Klein, we see how good he is.
Yeah.
So I don't think that aged too bad. I think that aged his career a little better than even some of his decision wins. Chris Padilla, however, is a finisher.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm super familiar with Chris Padilla.
Yeah.
But dude's a finisher. Looking back
Definitely.
at his record, dude's a finisher. He gets the job done. A TKO over Rongshu.
That's
the performance that Rongshu just had over Cody Steele was really impressive.
Yes.
So to do that to Rongshu, doctor stoppage in round 2 must have put some serious damage on him.
Yeah.
Club over James Yontop. TKO over the great Justin James, dude.
Dang,
You remember
bro.
Justin James? Bro, if you type in a photo of American bald guy, that's Justin James. He just looks like a guy.
Just a generic dude.
Just a generic dude. But no, Justin James didn't do horribly in the UFC back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got good wins. I'm going to go with Chris Padilla here.
Nice. I actually am as well. I was looking back at it, and I rate a win over Yontop pretty highly, especially after seeing Yontop's performance against Rufy and the amount of damage that guy could clearly take. Obviously, in this case, it was a first-round submission, so it's a little different circumstance, but that means that Chris Padilla can put it on to a really game opponent and get the job done. So for me, that's kind of a big win. I'm going Chris Padilla for sure.
All right. Let's move on to the main card, because the main card is quite good.
It's great.
Now, you're going to have some splaining to do here.
Sure. Happy to.
I don't know. You have some hate for Nathaniel Wood for some reason. I don't understand it.
That's funny that you bring that up because I wasn't even thinking about that. It's not that I dislike Nathaniel Wood as much as it's that I like Morgan Charrier and therefore have to dislike Nathaniel Wood in this case.
I guess so. I guess
You know-
that's what you got to tell yourself.
It's absolutely what I have to tell myself. I'm a ride or die pirate style. We've been over this time and time again, and Morgan Charrier is one of those guys that I think really embodies it. He's had a little bit of kind of some turbulence. Obviously, great win in his last fight out. Had that really wonderful knockout. Lost to Chepe Mariscal, which is not amazing.
Tough fight though.
Yeah, I mean, Chepe's always game, right? He's one of those guys. He actually just fought not that long ago, and he looked great in his last fight. So you have to give him credit there. It was a split decision as well, so it wasn't like he just got completely blown out of the water. And then before that, had another first-round knockout. So Morgan's one of those guys that has a lot of momentum, and where he's seen struggles, it's understandable because his opponents are also fairly good. So in my case, again, it's less about Nathaniel Wood here and more that I've got to stick with my roots. I've got to keep rooting for the Pirates, man.
That's fair. Honestly, when I was looking at the card, this is probably the toughest one to pick for me.
Yeah.
I've gone back in my head, back and forth a little bit, trying to think about this one. Listen, Nathaniel Wood is impressive at featherweight. Mm-hmm. I feel like he probably was cutting a ton of weight to make bantamweight at the beginning there, decided to move up to featherweight, and he's kind of an undersized featherweight.
Yeah.
But Morgan Charrier is not the biggest guy either.
No.
But this is just a tough one for me to pick. I don't know. I do like Nathaniel Wood's fighting style quite a bit. It's nice and polished. Mm-hmm. Morgan Charrier is a little bit more of a wild card.
Definitely.
He's very talented as well and very scrambly. Mm-hmm. I don't see Nathan beating him in the grappling in this fight.
Yeah.
Man.
It's an interesting one because Morgan Charrier's last fight against Miranda was another one of those circumstances where, to be fair, Miranda was winning pretty decent parts of that fight. Miranda's also got that kind of really crisp, clean, polished, sort of tight style where everything looks nice. And that can work. And we've seen it do well against Morgan, but in this last case, obviously, it was in that chaos where Morgan was able to kind of make the difference.
Yeah, I know he's good at that chaotic fight. I just don't know if Nathaniel Wood is going to give it to. Listen, man, Nathaniel Wood has really good UFC experience. He's fought great fighters in the UFC. Well, not great, but good. I just like his style. I think he's clean. I think he's game for a war. Mm-hmm. And in a fight that's like, I'm looking at, all right, close split decision. I don't know. Yeah. I could see them both having their moments. This is a tough one for me to pick. Honestly, I'm just going to go with Nathaniel Wood. Hey. He's got more UFC experience. I just think I'm going to confuse myself the more I try to think about this one.
That's fair.
Because it really is pretty even on paper. But I'm going to go with Nathaniel Wood.
Nice. I like it.
All right. Up next, Jordan Vucenic versus Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan, I always get confused with that dude. I think he's Welsh, Mason Jones. I don't know why. Okay. I always get them confused. But Jordan Vucenic is kind of like a Pokemon, evolved Pokemon version of Chris Duncan. Chris Duncan is slow. Listen, when I'm thinking about this fight, how this is going to go, Jordan Vucenic is clearly very good. He had a close fight with Guram Kutateladze, which it's kind of crazy. Like Jordan Vucenic's on the main card, Guram is opening up the entire card. It's very weird. I don't understand how these things work, but
English
Jordan
supremacy,
Vucenic
man,
is very good.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna have this. He's gonna have the speed advantage. He's gonna have the grappling advantage.
Jordan is
slow. I don't like fighters at lightweight that are slow.
Chris Duncan's had a fair bit of grappling experience, though. I mean, he's got 2 submissions.
Yeah, but
both
Vucenic
in the first round.
But Vucenic's just a bit higher level. Like Vucenic's not getting caught in guillotines. He's not. He's a high level grappler.
Okay.
Chris Duncan can sub guys who aren't that high level grappler. They're like strikers, like Balagioki. But yeah, I think Vucenic is going to have the grappling enough to deal with that. I'm going to go Vucenic.
Nice. Yeah, this is one of those where for me, I've got to go with Chris Duncan on this for the grappling. It's one of those that I was looking into it. Jordan hasn't had a ton of UFC experience, so Chris, I think, has got him beat there. That being said, Jordan may have more experience overall. I'd like to see Chris Duncan try and make this a grappling exchange because I do think he is the slower fighter and he's going to be on a disadvantage on the feet. So I think it may be one of those situations where his game is going to be to try and make this kind of ugly. It's going to be a cage fight, unfortunately, where it's going to be a lot of getting held.
Yeah, he needs to make it ugly.
And that's what he's going to have to do is try and slow it down. And I think if he can slow it down maybe over the course of 2 or 3 rounds, he can potentially get it done, maybe by decision.
I just think against Vucenic's style, I just don't really think that's going to help him much.
Okay.
Vucenic's got this. Listen, like when you see guys in there that almost have this, like obviously what I'm about to say is like a different level, but like the Topuria level, like confidence where they're in there and just like not really worried about anything, no matter how the fight's going. They're kind of just keeping the same expression. Vucenic has that disposition inside of a fight. And I just don't think Chris Duncan is like that level of fighter.
Okay.
That's really gonna like worry Vucenic about much.
Dang. Well, I'm going Chris Duncan anyway. I like a good underdog. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Let's move up. Molly McCann versus Alexia Thainara. I do remember watching Alexia on the Contender Series.
Okay.
And she wasn't fighting a can either. I remember, I don't remember her name, but it was another Brazilian who was also talented. I mean, at 11-1, that's an impressive record. And I do remember her being very well-rounded as well. She can crack on the feet. She's good in the scrambles. I could see Molly McCann losing here, getting TKO'd, and then retiring. Honestly, that's what I see here.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me because my heart initially went to Molly McCann. I've always kind of rooted for Molly McCann. Unfortunately, that's been a little bit difficult over the course of her career. She had some crazy wins. She had both of those spinning elbow knockouts that were just kind of super viral. We all got real hyped about it. Back to back, we thought it wasn't repeatable. She did it twice. And then I think, and that's the thing, right? Is I think we've been chasing the dragon on Molly McCann ever since that, and I think we're never going to catch it again. So my heart goes Molly McCann, but I think I'm going to have to go Alexia on this one just for the sake of I think that's where the win's going to happen.
It's the smart pick.
Yeah,
that's the smart pick.
Yep.
All right, let's move up. Gunnar Nelson versus Kevin Holland. I can't bring myself to bet on Kevin Holland or pick Kevin Holland for a fight. I just can't do it.
Nope.
I just can't do it.
No.
Man. Gunnar Nelson, though, he fights once a year, once every 2 years. Usually looks pretty good, though. I do like Gunnar Nelson.
Is he still with SBG?
Man.
Or did he finally move on and hopefully get away from John Kavanaugh?
I don't know. I think he moved away from SPG a while ago, but I can't be sure.
Yeah, that makes a difference. But I'll give you my pick because I've got an easy one here.
Yeah, go.
I think it's a safe bet to say Gunnar Nelson here. We just saw Kevin Holland lose to a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Gunnar Nelson's whole game is around keeping people on the control on the ground. He's got a bunch of submissions. He's got good ground and pound once he gets you in that mount or from a side control or a back take or just wherever he kind of wants it to be. Kevin Holland, to me, feels like he's given up. Kevin Holland seems like that spark is not there anymore. He's realized that he's not going to get a title shot at this point in his career. I think Kevin Holland is closer to Tony Ferguson than he is to a title, right? Like we're getting into that realm where it's just the dude fights all the time. That's awesome. We love to see it.
I hear what you're saying.
Keep losing, bro.
I hear what you're saying, but every once in a while in Kevin Holland's career, he has that fight. He has that performance that we're like, oh, that's why we love Kevin Holland. That's why he's still in the UFC. That's what. And I think, unfortunately for Gunnar Nelson, I think Goonie, whatever, is. I think he's that level of opponent that Kevin, and especially at welterweight. Talking about getting beat by grapplers at middleweight. You know what I mean? This isn't middleweight.
Yeah.
This is welterweight. I think Kevin Holland's going to have the size advantage. I think he might even have the strength advantage, honestly. Gunnar Nelson's pretty strong, but he's got to get you where he wants you, and then he's got you. Like if Gunnar Nelson is landing takedown after takedown and holding Kevin Holland down for a significant period of time, I could see sub in round 2 or 3. But At welterweight, I like Kevin Holland's chances of surviving the grappling exchanges, and I think he's going to have a size advantage here. And I think this is going to be one of those fights that reminds us why we love Kevin Holland and why we still like him to be in the UFC.
Damn. I really do hope so. I love seeing Kevin Holland fight. It's just been one of those things where recently he's come up short the last handful of times. And hey, maybe it's middleweight, maybe it's the competition that he's been facing. They've never given him anybody easy. They're always throwing him to the dogs, and I think he kind of likes that. But maybe Gunnar Nelson is a little bit better competition for him. Maybe that's where he wants to be. That being said, I think Gunnar Nelson still gets it done here.
Yeah, listen, I do rate Gunnar Nelson pretty highly. I
Yeah.
like seeing him fight. Every time he decides to come back after a 2-year layoff, I enjoy his fights.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So are you
All right,
picking
let's-
Kevin?
Yeah, I'm going Kevin.
Hey, love it. All right.
Against my better judgment.
Cool.
But let's go up Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Olberg. I think
Yeah.
this is a pretty easy pick, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I'm going Blachowicz.
Yeah.
I'm a good old Blachowicz enjoyer, and
Hell
I
yeah.
think he doesn't get the credit that he deserves. Honestly,
I agree.
and especially after Olberg's last performance, where he had honestly kind of a battle with Volkan Ozdemir.
Mm-hmm.
Like he didn't win that as soundly as I would have liked him to.
Yeah.
Like a guy who you want to be seeing fighting for the title in the next 2 fights didn't really dominate Volkan Ozdemir that badly.
Yeah.
And dude, when it comes to like the style of striker that Olberg is,
Yes.
we've seen Jan beat that style many times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm going Blachowicz.
Love it. I too am a big fan of the Polish power here. Tybura is already one of my picks. I've got to go Jan here as well. I think it's wild that he's an underdog. I think
Polish
Jan.
parlay.
Absolutely, man. The Polish parlay. There it is.
Yeah.
Jan's one of those guys that gets underestimated. I think he even got underestimated as champ. It was a wild thing. He gave Alex Pereira probably his hardest fight, obviously, besides Stylebender or Ankalaev now.
Yeah.
But, Carlos Olberg is one of those guys that's really fun to watch when he's good. And when he's fighting lower competition and he can get those knockouts and he has that footwork and he can kind of just play his game, he's fun to watch. Jan is a big jump in competition, I think, even compared to his last handful of fights. So it's going to be a pretty big jump. If Carlos can get it done, then maybe this talk of the title is there. But I think Jan does it. I think Jan gets this one done.
I think Jan does it, and then I think he fights Yuri Prohaska in Poland.
I don't like that, man. No, we got to give Yuri the title shot, bro. We can't be tying up Yuri anymore with these other fights.
No, I'm joking. I am joking. But it does sound like they're doing the Alex Pereira rematch right away. And if so, I don't want to see Yuri sit. So that's the only reason I say that.
That's fair. Okay.
I think it'd be a huge European fight. But I do think Jan is going to have not an easy time. But listen, I feel like Jan's figured out this style, and he's coming off a pretty big layoff.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't think that's going to matter.
No.
I think Olberg is not this like young up and coming prospect that people think he is. I think he's like 35.
I believe
like
so.
Olberg looks young, but he's either 34 or 35.
Let me see. Let's see. It doesn't tell me right here.
Don't quote me on that, but if I'm right, then tell people I said it for sure.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we both going Jan here.
I think so.
All right, let's move up to our main event. Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. The number one contender fight that no one wants. It's not really a number one contender fight, dude.
It's not.
Neither one of these guys, even with a dominant win, is gonna be fighting for the title next. There's other more exciting people that everyone wants to see.
Yeah.
But who knows? The UFC is probably going to do it just to spite us because they seem to want to take every good fight we could possibly have. They just pull it away from us and do something completely different.
Yeah.
I'm still mad at the UFC for not rebooking Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker, but whatever.
Understandably so.
I'm going to go Leon Edwards.
Nice.
Sean Brady's just another one of these guys that I'm never going to pick to win a fight. I mean, his only loss in the UFC is to Bilal, but stylistically, just against like most people in the top 10, I'm just not going to pick him.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those crazy things to me is I can never pick anybody that's been knocked out by Bilal Muhammad.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
And that's wild to me. And, we're talking about Leon Edwards here, who is a significantly better striker, I would argue, than Bilal. Even if you look back at their last fight, I don't know that the striking was Bilal's advantage in that one. Leon is a kickboxer, and he's a very crisp kickboxer. He's really good. He's really clean. He's got a lot of kicks. He likes his distance management. Sean Brady's obviously going to try and wrestle him here. I think it's going to be, get him against the cage, get him down to the ground, try and look for some ground and pound, maybe look for a submission. And I think Edwards has been in enough of those situations at this point where that's not going to be a difference maker here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. If he's getting up and scrambling with Bilal, he took down Kamaru Usman.
Yeah.
Sean Brady, you know what I mean, whatever. He might push him up against the fence for a little bit, but Leon's hard to take down, and even when you take him down, he's getting back up.
Yep.
Yeah, I just don't see an area where Sean Brady really has the advantage here, and
No.
I do want to see a good performance from Leon Edwards. I think this has the possibility to be a very dominant performance from Leon Edwards, and if he's more aggressive, like, man, he just needs to step on the gas pedal sometimes, and I think he could finish Sean Brady.
Yeah, I believe so. Absolutely. I mean, he's one of those guys that really needs to apply that pressure sometimes, and I think he underutilizes that. And again, even having him here as an underdog is wild to me. I don't know. I don't know how this is happening where we've completely forgotten who Leon Edwards is.
And forgotten who Sean Brady is.
Yeah.
He beat Gilbert Burns. Dude, everybody's been beating Gilbert Burns. Why is he a favorite over Leon Edwards, who just lost the title? I don't get it. Leon Edwards, dude, I could see him just fucking keeping the distance, front kicks, round kicks. Even if Sean Brady is blocking them, they're gonna be like, oh, he can't take too many more of those, even though he's blocking these head kicks. I could see Sean Brady being real open to the head kicks, and Leon Edwards with his jab and uppercut, dude. If he lands some nice jabs and uppercuts on Brady moving forward, I don't know. I just picture that in my head over and over, keeping it at distance, making Sean Brady really frustrated with kicks.
Yeah.
And tearing up the calves, tearing up the thighs, coming up top. Like I said, I think Sean Brady's going to be aware of the kicks and be blocking them, but I still think they're going to be affecting him. I think he's going to get frustrated and try to rush in too hard. And that's when Leon Edwards needs to get that uppercut going, that jab going. That's what I see happening here.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. All right, give us your thoughts. If you made it this far in the video, please comment down below, like, and subscribe. We appreciate everybody watching. Enjoy the fights. We'll catch you on the next one. Adios.
Peace.